FaZe got more scams under their belt than any other YouTuber, it feels like. The younger the audience, the more vulnerable. FaZe Clan really just loves getting involved in scams and facing no real consequences, because FaZe's audience is made up of mostly young kids that don't understand FaZe's greedy intentions. You know you've made it when the only thing the internet really knows you for is how many scandals you've been involved in. And FaZe Clan are no strangers to this. They've got a whole laundry list of prior accusations, including other scams. The worst of all of them has got to be their Save the Kids token scam. But how did we get here? How did we get from a bunch of super popular influencers promoting a kids charity to it all just being a way to scam their followers out of tens of thousands of dollars? How empty do you gotta be in the morality department to think that that's an okay way to behave? And the worst part of all this, you guys are gonna love this, the amount of money that they were willing to risk their entire lives, careers, and reputations over is nothing to them. It's chump change! They could easily earn that much in a month. It would be everything to the kids they were supposed to be raising it for. And instead of being decent human beings, they chose greed. The setup. To put it as simply as I can, multiple members of FaZe Clan are being accused of something called charity fraud, which is, it's a pretty apt descriptor. It's exactly what it sounds like. FaZe Clan members Jarvis, Nikon, Tico, and Kay are all being accused of falsely advertising a charity that never really existed in order to steal the proceeds for their own gain. They are essentially being accused of setting up this charity for the sole purpose of pulling off a pump and dump scheme at the expense of their own fans. Rich people scamming their own fans. That never happens. And this isn't the first time they've faced allegations along these lines.
First time.
FaZe K, in particular, has been called out for this kind of behavior a number of times. He's no stranger to advertising cryptocurrencies to his audience and then immediately selling off his shares when the exchange rate is high enough. So, with that in mind, I guess the question now becomes this. If FaZe Clan can have such a long history of doing this kind of thing and getting away with it, why did so many people fall for it again? To be honest, I think the answer to that is just that they made it look so damn believable. Let's just take a look at some of the people involved with this project. FaZe Clan's Jarvis, Nikon, Tico, and Kay, Ricegum, and Summer Rae. These aren't small names. They're not up-and-coming influencers looking for a way to boost their reputations. They've already made it big. They don't need the publicity surrounding something like this. They have something like 50 million followers between them. That's an insane amount of people to try and scam. And on top of all that, these guys weren't just posting about it on social media. It wasn't something that they talked about a couple of times and then forgot about. No! They made promo videos for this whole thing. They even made an entire website just to promote this charity, which is still active, by the way. You can go and read about how they just want to save the children and laugh about how it's all just one big lie. We know the truth now. You were never interested in helping anyone but yourselves and feeding your own greed. But how did they really manage to pull off something this big? The gold rush. Tricking your millions of followers into thinking they're doing something good with their money is one thing. Don't get me wrong here, it's still a terrible thing to do, but there has got to be more to it than that, right? It's not like they were just holding out a charity bucket and asking people for their loose change, you know? There was an actual plan behind the entire thing, like Ocean's 11 level planning. So how'd they do it? How did they try to pull off one of the worst scams in living memory? A YouTuber by the name of CoffeeZilla actually did a really thorough breakdown of the events leading up to the scam. He did a deep dive into what was really going on behind the scenes and uncovered just how gross everything surrounding this charity was. And what he found is, well, if you were hoping that any of the FaZe boys were going to make it out of this mess looking innocent, then I got some really bad news for you. When people first started realizing that maybe things weren't as innocent as they'd been led to believe, they released an article explaining what had happened. This article went to great lengths to try and explain that none of the ambassadors had anything to do with the scam. They'd all genuinely believed in the project and had just wanted to help the kids in need. Nothing to see here, we promise!
Nothing to see here, please!
Except that's not true. And we know that's not true because there have been some, let's just say, wild revelations about what these guys were doing with the crypto in their wallets. Keep that in mind because I'm gonna come back to it. The article also claimed that there was something known as an anti-whale mechanism in place that would stop buyers from being able to manipulate the market. Now, if you're not entirely sure what that means, it basically boils down to this. It's a piece of code written into cryptocurrencies that stops buyers from selling a certain percentage of stock at a time. The limit is usually capped at around 20%, meaning that if you're trying to sell off your entire wallet, you have to wait around 5 days to do it. But what CoffeeZilla's investigation found was that while the 20% cap had been written into the code of the prototype coin, the same could not be said for the official Save the Kids token. The anti-whale mechanism written into the code of the actual tokens had been changed at the last minute, literally the day before the donation link went live. And the time limit had been changed from 20% every 24 hours to 20% every minute, meaning that anybody involved would be able to cash out within 5 minutes of that link going live. And this isn't just speculation either. Not only did CoffeeZilla find the change in the code during his investigation, one of the people that worked on the project admitted to doing it.
I know that you changed the anti-whale measures last minute to make it easier to dump on people.
Yep, I know. I've talked about that in all the AMAs.
Now, why would that code need to be changed if none of the people involved had bad intentions? I can't possibly imagine why anyone involved would want that code changed. They're all just so sweet and innocent and had nothing to do with it, remember? Except we know that that isn't true either, because their wallets are open to the public, and as long as you know their ID numbers, you can track what they've spent money on. And these guys started selling off their share of Save the Kids token pretty much immediately. FaZe K sold all of his shares within the first couple of minutes. Jarvis and Nikon sold off some of their shares that day as well. Now, why would you do that if you're trying to raise money for a bunch of kids that need help? Why would you start cashing in on other people's donations if you weren't doing it as a cash grab? The only person who doesn't seem to have sold any of his crypto off is Tico. So maybe he genuinely did believe that they were going to be helping raise money for charity. And that's not even mentioning just how heavily K seems to have been involved with, well, all of it. Explaining K's potential involvement with this entire scam could be a video by itself, so I don't really have time to get into it. But I will say that every possible thread anybody has on how this happened seems to lead either directly to K or has him involved somewhere along the way. Make of that what you will. Time to face the music. So what happens now? Where do we even go from here? Is FaZe Clan ever going to be able to recover from something like this? The answer to all of those questions is that unfortunately only time will tell. I wish I had more of an exciting answer to give you here, because who likes waiting for this kind of information? But I can't tell the future, and these things take time to figure out. If there is a legal case to be made here, and there probably is because John McAfee was arrested for a very similar reason, then the authorities need to figure out who was involved. But, like I mentioned at the very start of this video, there is a chance they could be charged with something called charity fraud. According to a Dexerto article, if that goes through, then they could be looking at a potential fine of $1 million or up to 30 years in prison. And that's without additional charges that could increase a potential prison sentence by up to 20 years. So make sure you subscribe to the channel, because I'm sure that we'll be covering whatever comes next for these guys. But even outside of legal consequences, I think it's pretty safe to say that FaZe K's career is dead in the water. As soon as this all started coming out, FaZe dropped him like a sack of potatoes. Nothing screams guilt more than your own company hanging you out to dry. I genuinely don't think there's any coming back from this for him. He's tried making a couple of apologies on Twitter saying, "I want you all to know that I had no ill intent promoting any crypto altcoins. I honestly and naively thought we all had a chance to win, which just isn't the case. I didn't vet any of this with my team at FaZe, and I now know I should have." And if that wasn't gross enough, he then followed it up with, "It was so irresponsible of me to speak publicly about any coins without knowing and knowing now that they can do more harm than good." And maybe I'd be inclined to believe that if he hadn't, immediately sold off all of his Save the Kids tokens at launch, maybe I'd be inclined to believe him if he didn't already have such a long history of promoting cryptocurrencies to his audience. Maybe I'd be inclined to believe him if he actually seemed like he was sorry instead of just being upset that he got caught in the first place. If your fans' trust and support means as much to you as you say it does, then you wouldn't have scammed them in the first place, especially when the majority of your audience is made up of young, impressionable kids that are going to take you at your word. But what do you guys think? Do you think any of these guys will face legal consequences? Do you think they'll just keep doing it until somebody stops them? And who do you guys think the mastermind behind everything really is? The George Clooney of the situation. Except George Clooney was stealing from Andy Garcia and not children. Anyway, let us know in the comments below.